Hey, I just made this video and obviously I ran out of time, or I just made another video, but I ran out of time. I just wanted to share a story. Um, it's actually from my childhood, and I've been going to therapy, and one of the things that my therapist asked me to do, and I've said this in a couple of my other videos, was write an autobiography. And she gave me kind of an outline as far as she wanted. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of step by step. She wanted the things that I remember from being born. Do I remember anything from my birth? Apparently, some babies can remember things when they're inside the womb and when they're born. Um, and then she wanted me to share. It went on from there. It went on like toddler stage, and then preschool, elementary school, junior high, high school, and then the journey into young adulthood, and then up into where you currently are. Um, but I wrote it, and we actually started going over it in my last therapy session. I think we got up into the point like where I graduated from high school, um, moved out to California for a little while, and got into some trouble before I decided to get myself together. But that the story that I want to share is actually, as she was reading through it, she kind of pinpointed where she believes that my gender identity disorder first kind of showed itself, or where that began, and and to her, through my writing, from what I've written so far, is when I was in elementary school, kindergarten actually. Growing up, I was an only child. My brother wasn't born until I was 8 years old. So I was the only child. I played with a lot of my cousins because my dad and his brothers and sisters are very close. And I had a lot of cousins that were pretty close in age. But the ones that were closest in age to me were boys, my boy cousins, and those were the ones that I always played with. Um, and I remember seeing them peeing outside, and wondering why I didn't have the same equipment that they had, and decided that I was like them, so I should pee standing up as well. So through a few messy practices, I actually mastered that skill at the young age of like 5 or so. But going into kindergarten, and having said that, the only kids that I really played with were boys, and were my cousins, maybe some neighbor boys and things like that. But I didn't have too many friends that were girls when I was that young. So going into, hey, my phone's ringing. Okay, we'll get that in a minute. Going going into elementary school, going into kindergarten in specific, I instantly made friends with a few boys that were in my class. And we would do things like, during the playtime, we would ride the tricycles, and they had these massive wooden blocks that were like hollow on the inside, and we used to build forts and things like that with them. And they always accepted me, and they were always okay with me playing with them and helping them. Um, and there was never any time where they were like, hey, you're a girl, you can't play with us, or anything like that, until one day a new boy came. He came from another school, and I went over at recess, per usual, and went to go help them with the blocks. And he pushed me down and told me to go away. You're a girl. Girls can't help. So I remember being very confused by this, because why couldn't I help, and why couldn't I be with those boys? Because that's how I felt, and that's what I always did. So a teacher's assistant actually saw this happening, and instead of coming over and correcting him, she picked me up and she took me by the hand and she took me over to where the girls were playing. The girls were playing in these plastic like kitchen type sets, and they were like having tea parties and whatever they were doing over there. And when we got there, she said, "Play house," and then she walked away. And thinking back on that moment now, I think that was my first moment of someone really trying to feminize me, because my mother even kind of just let me be myself when I was younger, and never really had any issues if I didn't want to wear dresses or pink or this or that. So, and I remember I walked immediately away from the kitchen area, and I sat on one of those tricycles, and I just watched the boys build this fort, and I was so angry. And as I watched, I got angry and angrier and angrier. And when they got the forts done, they went inside the fort to play, whatever they were doing. But I backed the tricycle all the way up as far as I could, and rode it. And as I was riding, of course, I kept getting faster and faster. And my intentions was to ride it directly into the fort. So that's what I did. I rode it directly into the fort, and the fort just crumbled. And some of the boys were crying, and the teacher saw it and started yelling at me, and took me to the principal's office. I had to be the first kindergartner to ever go to the principal's office, I believe. And back then they used to paddle. Your parents, when you started school in your elementary school, and I say back then, but I guess it really wasn't that long ago. But so I got paddled because apparently my parents signed the permission slip. But the boys never gave me any trouble after that. The new boy never gave me any issues after that. So and she sees that as maybe one of the first defining moments. And there was also a moment right before I started kindergarten that I used to ride those plastic big wheels, and I outgrew the one that I had, and so my grandma took me to the store to buy one, and she saw a pink and red strawberry shortcake one, and I liked the cartoon at the time, so she assumed that I would love to have one, but I didn't want it, and instead pointed to the blue and white Smurfs big wheel, and she tried to convince me for a little while, but eventually I won because I wasn't having it, and I loved that big wheel. It was awesome. But yeah, that's all I got. Just kind of wanted to share that story. I thought it was very interesting because those sorts of things you think about, but you don't think about it in that spectrum like a therapist would. Unless you have education in psychology and in gender studies and that sort of thing. But so yeah, that's all I got. See you guys.